Hi. I just got done recording the whack order I watched the Freddy and Jason movies, and now I am recording the whack order I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. As far as which one of these is going to be uploaded first, I don't know, but yeah. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a franchise that I have a very deep connection with. Because I was obsessed with it as a young age. So if you watch the other video where I talk about the whack order I watched the Freddy and Jason movies, you'll know that the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie I watched was the remake. In 2003, when I was 3. Or in 2004, a year after it came out. But it was definitely before 2005. And yes, I saw a camera move through a woman's head out the back of the van, pan to a beautiful wide shot of the sun while everyone runs out puking, when I was 3. Yep. This is my Leatherface. I gotta say, this, like, the second Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie I saw was in 2010. So, 2003 to 2010, that's 7 years of this one movie being my entire basis of knowledge for the movie. And I remember for several years I thought that it was literally true events, like, this is as it happened. When I found out it was a remake, that was when I was like, alright, well, this can't be exact, because they wouldn't do it exactly like that, right? And then, of course, later on I found out it had Geen and all that shit. But yeah, I love the characters in this movie. I love the tone of this movie. Like, being a young kid, and a lot of why I watched slashers was, I guess, to fully understand the human body, but also, like, fully understand character, and, like, seeing stories with stakes in them, and, like, yeah, 2003 was, like, 2003 is in my top 2 or 3 favorite years for movies, but also horror movies. Well, horror movies for sure. If you throw in just movies, it's in the top 4 probably. I don't know. But yeah, I love the way that this movie tries to emulate the remake in the way the remake tries to emulate the original in different ways. Because my relationship with this movie has evolved. Now, as a kid, I loved this movie. 3 of the characters in it have the same name as a family member I have. And one of those is actually named after the character in this movie, my younger brother, Kemper. And I was born in Texas. I was not raised in Texas. And when I was 4 or 5, I was like, thank God, because I don't want Leatherface to get me. And then I realized, oh, it's the 70s and he lost an army. He can't get me. And then I realized that he's not real at all. But, yeah, this movie stuck with me. And, I think that intro and outro really, like, I thought that was real. And then when I realized that was fake, I was like, oh, shit. Very graphic movie. Like, in the first movie, the tone is very creepy and eerie, and it's unsettling, and it's realistic, but it's also a dark comedy. And the remake, they know that they can't do that better. So they get under your skin in a different way, and they do it just as effectively. They get under your skin with, like, dread and the knowledge of impending death, and the whole, like, the macabre, gothic nature of it all, and, like, the filming of it is just beautiful. Like, I fucking love this movie. I think the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, like, almost as much as a classic as the original. Not as much, but almost as much. So if you think about it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, is the first movie that's really, like, a masked killer killing a bunch of young adults with a final girl. doesn't follow the exact formula of it. It's like it's a proto slasher. It's not a true slasher, but it is the beginning seeds of what that began as the slashers. And I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times, but like horror, the reason slashers work is because if you exchange the killer and the motives for the killer, the survivor, and the victims, you can tell a million stories with the same formula. And basically throughout the 80s, yes, there was a lot of people that understood the formula is just that, and the story should be organic in its own thing, and just utilize the best parts of the formula for the story, and ignore what doesn't apply. So you get classics like Child's Play and fucking Nightmare on Elm Street and all this other shit. Then capitalism and money made it to where less and less people were making horror slashers to tell a story, and more of them were making horror slashers to make a horror slasher. Led to the ultimate satire of Scream, which made the killer's intent to be a slasher icon, so that the whole story being in the slasher formula would happen in real life, because the killer's not acting under logical serial killer motives. They're derealized and acting under slasher killer motives. Scream comes out, and it reminded everyone that you can tell a good story too, and that should be the point. And the sequels and like Scary Movie and all this other stuff, they really like got people thinking about this, like slashers and why they worked. And then people went back and were digging up classics. Mostly to capitalize off money, but with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, I swear it's a passion project. Everyone, you can tell, loves the original film, and they're putting their heart and soul into it. The guy that plays Morgan like throws up on the gun, and he's fucking like this, and the guy that plays Andy fucking stuck on that fucking harness in pain for fucking days, and he's like, don't let me off for lunch, because if I come off of it, I don't want to come back onto it. So like, he was on that for a long time. And like the emotions and power of these characters, and like how like they don't have a moment to breathe. You get to know them a little bit, joking, and then immediate trauma before they're introduced to the family, which is genius, because they knew they couldn't one up the original like the hitchhiker scene. Like they knew they couldn't make a guy that was gonna top nubbins. And they needed to introduce them to fear through a hitchhiker another way, and this is the perfect way to do that. And it's very dark, because it says that even if you make it out, just like on the poster of the original, what will be left of them, and that doesn't have to mean physically. It doesn't in the original either. Fucking Aaron in this movie, wrecked. And so is the hitchhiker. And she symbolizes like the trauma of the events that are taking place. And then like having Kemper die first when he's like the most dominant of the males is it's a shocker too, because like then you're immediately thinking that no one is safe. And then of course they slowly tick the guys away, so it's just the chicks against Leatherface's large ass. And then the pepper kill is so phenomenal, because like the feathers and the lights, and just like I could go on about the remake forever. And of course the scene where Aaron has to kill Andy is just so tragic and emotional. Like it's something. There's like a deeper, like subconscious or unconscious part of me that like has a respect for like the different types of kills, and like different types of utilizing that human primal fight flight, but also not just the the fight or flight instinct, but like the fight or flight tactic. And I think that part of the reason that I love slashers still is because it's so primal. Because sorry about all these cars passing for work. I'm filming this at like 6 in the morning. But yeah, it's very primal because it's all about like what you would do in that situation. Would you live and would you die? And like who will live and who will die? But yes, Pepper is the one chick that Aaron did not know before the events of this movie. If you listen carefully in the beginning, I mean, you obviously all know the fucking story, but like Pepper is another hitchhiker they picked up, and she's just immediately trying to bang Andy in front of everybody. So having that also be the point where she finds out Kemper's dead from Leatherface wearing his face, it makes the scene even more powerful, given that she's the only person that, like, it's the only person she didn't see die, and the person she just saw die is the only person that dies that she didn't know for years. So it's very poetic and necessary to have that be in the same scene. I think this is a very well constructed movie, and like it's worthy of dissection. But I don't want to drone on and on and on about that movie, so I'm going to move on. The second movie I saw was in 2010, and it was the prequel to the remake. And when I saw this, I was like hyped as fuck, because I knew at that point this was a franchise, and then this movie was a remake. But I didn't know that there was another movie in that timeline, and that it was a prequel. And I love Sheriff Hoyt, and in this movie he really shines. And I like the characters in the first remake, but like in this movie, I really like the characters because, like I said in the other movie, these movies are they tap into shit that war taps into, which is like especially like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Wrong Turn, because it's group killers, but it's one group versus another group, and it's life and death, and it evokes a lot of the same emotions. And the idea that they are trying to, like, the whole relationship with the brothers in that movie is like top tier sibling horror movie stuff. Like you got the one brother who's a total badass. He survived Vietnam, and he's only going back so that he can make sure that his brother survives it. And then you got the brother who is like me, and he's like, he understands what the conflict is, or at least knows that it's not his place to go. And he's like, this war isn't a moral war for a good reason, like the revolution or stopping Hitler. This is not my bag, I'm not going. And I understand both of them, and it's very compelling. And the gore in this movie is fucking phenomenal. And like I said, I love Andrew Bernarski as Leatherface. Like, I think that this version of Leatherface is very mean and brutal. And like, I think that he is less mentally deficient and more vicious, because Leatherface has always been a tragic character where his family abused him into what he is. Now that really isn't something that I caught with the remake as much, because it's more explicit in the original, and it's kind of implied in the prequel of the remake, and it's more implied that the town bullied him into being crazy in the remake timeline. Like, cause in like both movies, his family is crazy, but the first movie does a better job of shining a light on that crazy family raising him, making him crazy, In the remake, they're not particularly mean to Leatherface. They are very loving to Leatherface. And he's less of a scared animal. Like, human beings are animals, of course, but Leatherface, being mentally deficient, is he's a layer away from the social programming that all of us have had. But he has had programming, just very warped programming. I think this segues into the third movie I saw, 2010 as well, was the original. It immediately became my second favorite. And I understood that it was better than the remake, I just couldn't love it more. Obviously, I had 7 years with this movie from before I could remember, and it's very well made. And I want to say a few more things about the prequel before I move on to the original, but I love that everyone dies. And I understand that it's because the prequel and the cops would have came, but I wasn't thinking about that when I was watching it, and the idea that everyone died was it was newer to me then than it is now. It's not common that much. It's very nihilistic. And I thought it was very brutal. And I love that we see Leatherface making his first human face, and it's a character that we like, and that it's so wet and stitched together. I like the face in the I like the Kemper face in the first one, but that one looked like it was only cut out in the back and the neck, and then it was just draped on. And the other one that he wore in that movie was a bunch of faces stitched together that were all different layers of decomposition. And I always think of the word macabre when I think of that movie, because macabre is just the essence of death. And the remake is goes through basically everything about death. We see someone kill themselves, and then we see corpses throughout the basement. They're all, some of them are fresh, and some of them are skeletons, and everything in between. And so the word macabre has always been an association with me to these movies. And that comes into play with the original too. Now, I knew from the first second that I was watching this movie, hell, I knew before, but I knew that this was going to be one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The original is such a fucking classic. It is very good. The whole first frame is just snapshots of corpses while the news talks about people robbing corpses. But the news story doesn't end there. After they get through that, and you just see Franklin hilariously fall down the hill to break the tension, because this movie is a dark comedy and no one realizes it. The people talking in the background are still going on about more fucked up, crazy shit that, you might take a couple viewings to hear all of that. It's pretty fucking weird and gnarly. I don't remember everything that's said, but... And, every single frame works to, build the tension or work with the humor to cut the tension. It's, perfectly constructed movie. I don't know, I love this movie. And, the whole part where they get to the gas station and Drayton's there, and the guy, the bald guy, whenever Drayton's talking to him, the bald guy washes the car, and then whenever he's leaving, the bald guy stops washing the car. And it's really funny because it's just so not normal, and it means there's something off with that guy's head. But it's also letting you know that guy has a power dynamic in this movie. So there's a lot of things that they do that are simultaneously creepy and funny. Nubbins, great time for a truck to pass. Nubbins is hilarious. And yes, he's creepy and unsettling, but he's just funnier than shit. Like, and Franklin is funnier than shit when he's like bitching and shit. And I love that Pam's astrology things are just spot on. And the whole like setting this up. And then when you get to the Kirk death, and I finally see Leatherface, and I start to compare and contrast, because obviously I do. I noticed that Leatherface in the original is nothing like Leatherface in the remake. Leatherface in the original is a scared, mentally deficient person who has a dissociative identity disorder type of dealio. Or, like, he can't cope with his reality, so he has to wear a mask and present himself as someone else. And he's highly abused, and the violence lashes out as a defense mechanism more than an attack. And when I realized the dynamic of this movie, I was like, whoa. And I think I could, but I love the look of all of the fucking bone furniture and like all this other cool stuff, like, and then like Pam gets put on the hook, and it's like, yes, in the remake we see the hook go in, but in the original there's no shirt, so it's like, oh my god, you know, you don't have to see it go in. And then like Leatherface starts going at his corpse with a chainsaw with her in front of it screaming, and it's like, holy shit, this is depraved. And it's just like, and of course 10-year-old me is laughing at all this, like, whoa. And just like, I could go on with the original too, but I don't want to make the video too long. But God, I just love the original. And then of course when Jerry goes down, you're like, you know shit. And then at that point, when Jerry dies, I'm like, wait, this is called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and no one's been killed with a chainsaw yet. And there's only 2 people left, and I know one of them's got to live. And yes, I did put that in my negatives. But, yeah. I fucking love this movie. I should move on, though. Like, I'm going to get more into it in the podcast at some point. We're not planning on covering that one soon. But, sometime after the new movie comes out and we see it, we'll do that on the podcast, too, at some point. Up next, I have part 2. I got this one from the library. And I did return it. And I think it was 2011. I think. It wasn't 2010, because I lived in a duplex, and in 2010, I borrowed the prequel from the guy that lived there, and when I saw 2, a different chick lived there, took me to the library to get part 2. And I don't think it was 2012, but it might have been, but it was either 11 or 12. So, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And I like this a lot more now than I did when I first watched it. The humor wasn't my problem. I mean, there's parts of it now that are hilarious that weren't as funny then, but like, I still laughed out loud then a lot. I still loved Chop Top. I thought he wasn't as good as Nubbins, but it's true now. I'll save for even when I do the character rankings for these. And I loved seeing Drayton and Leatherface again. And I love the evolution of Leatherface, where now he's been out of the house more because they had to move after that shit happened. That he's starting to get a crush on a girl, and like the comedy dynamic there, and like there's a whole lot you could say about that, just like as far as like commentary on society, and the whole idea that this came out 12 years after the original. and it's still this good is mind-boggling. I mean, it is 1986, and like the Psycho sequels are also great, but it's insane. And like I don't remember a lot about my first initial viewing thoughts on it because I saw it once, and then I thought, okay. And I thought, well, this has like by far the least kills, and it kills Leatherface and everyone at the end. So why is there sequels? And I was confused, and I didn't see it again until I got it on DVD, or I think I probably borrowed it a few times to watch it. But right like years later after I'd already seen the next few, or yeah, the next couple on the list. As it stands now, I think that it is hilarious. I need to rewatch it because I'm sure that there's a lot more. I'm sure that it's just as good as the first one in different ways if I look for it, but I haven't found as much in it because I haven't seen it as much. Whereas in the first one, I was telling you basically frame by frame what's all great about it. In the second one, I know that there's a lot of great stuff about it, the whole sets, the fact that the first two kills are douchebag yuppies, and we're moving on from hippies to yuppies, and like I love Lefty and Stretch and LG, and I love the killers, but I don't think it works as well as the first movie. It's really goofy, and I didn't get it the first time I watched it. I got the Blu-ray, and then I watched a bunch of extended scenes, and where like they actually have the only Texas Chainsaw Massacre in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, where it kills multiple people with the chainsaw in like a fucking club or something. I'm really fucking bummed they left that out, because if that was in this movie, I probably would have seen it a lot more, had it higher in my ranking, and like a whole bunch of other shit, because like there's only like 3 or so kills on screen in this movie. Like there's the brain kill, and then the next guy dies off screen, and then LG gets beat with the hammer, and then he gets skinned, and then he dies, and then the whole ending happens where Leatherface gets stabbed and they all blow up, but the blowing up is off screen. So like there's not a lot of kills in this movie. And that was really what drug it down for me when I first watched it. We hit 2013, and this is when Texas Chainsaw 3D comes out. I'm really glad that I watched the 4 that I watched before I watched this one. Because I get my generation's Leatherface and the original Leatherface in their 2 movies. And I know that, obviously I know he's not played by Gunnar Hansen in the sequel, but it's the same Leatherface, whereas he dies in that movie, so every other Leatherface is like some reboot, weird, other timeline thing, which is mind-boggling to think about. You think like, oh, he survived that whole crazy shit, and then he went off to his other extended family that we never heard of. Anyway, I don't know, but I hadn't seen those movies at this point, and at this point was trying to complete the franchises that I trying to complete seeing all the franchises that I've seen. And this new movie came out, and I was like, fuck yeah, and I watched it, and I realized that, oh, it's a sequel to the original. And then, obviously, the first time I watched it, because the original came out, like, the year my dad was born, so I knew the final girl was way too fucking young to be the final girl immediately. And that took me out of it. And then, the whole movie I just didn't like. Like, it's entertaining because of, like, it's got good kills and it's shot well, and obviously the chicks are really hot. Like, I like the final girl when she's being a Sawyer, like crazy. I love it. But I hate that they make Leatherface the hero and that they make all these town folks the bad guys for killing a family that was like killing a bunch of people. It's not like they were lynching someone who didn't do anything. I'm not saying that that's the proper way to take care of someone, but they're definitely deserved Leatherface to kill them. I just think I just don't like it when like the killers are being the hero. Like in Freddy vs. Jason, like Jason's not the hero; he's the lesser of two evils. And in this, they make Leatherface. He's supposed to be the anti-hero. And another thing that I hate about this is Heather goes there with her friends. Leatherface kills her friends. She just met this man. And she decides to team up with him and live with him. Now, I've gotten into this in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies because I think that this, like, type of movie really draws in on the rawness of combat to death. Because these movies are all about death and the macabre and group death and the way a group of people act when something is trying to kill them elicits similar emotional responses to war. And the idea that you would trade out on, like, it's dishonorable, and I deeply disrespect it. And yeah, this movie is bad. Like, it's my second least favorite of these movies so far. And I'm worried about the new movie, but I'm also excited about the new movie. And one of the reasons I'm worried is it's going to do the same thing this one did, where it's basically the new Texas Chainsaw is the Halloween 2018 to Texas 3D's Halloween H2O. And the idea of Leatherface being 60 running around sounds dumb as a concept to me, but that's all I know about the movie, and the trailer looks awesome, so. Oh yeah, and I think the 3D gimmick in this movie is, I think it's done well, actually. I think that if you're going to make a 3D slasher, it's not like My Bloody Valentine good, but the way they handle the 3D with the chainsaw and everything, it's everything you'd want from the 3D movie. I mean, sawing the guy in half at the camera, fucking throwing the chainsaw at the camera, like the chainsaw coming at us through the coffin. Like, I think that they did it very well. Way less gimmicky than the Friday the 13th one, although I like the kills more in that movie. Alright, moving on. So at this point, at this point in my life, I've gone through a lot. And I started drinking when I was 13. And I smoked weed for the first time when I was 13. And these are the movies that are post that. I got her brother to get me Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 and 4 from Video and More. This was like one of the last years that Video and More was a thing. This was 2013, 2014. So it's hard not to think about, as I'm going through this, like where I was in my life when I watched these movies. And to say the least, the 90s Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies aren't as good as the 0s, 70s, or 80s Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. But it is a fun movie history lesson. And by that I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacres, like most horror franchises, if you follow them through and you think about each movie as a time capsule, and you think about the climate, it's fun to think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 as the first non-canon Hollywood sequel, whereas the second movie is written by the same people. It's the true sequel. And then 3 is the Hollywood sequel, and then 4 is written by the other writer, and it's his true sequel. Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. I saw the trailer before I saw the movie, obviously. And the trailer is fucking great. So I was hyped. And obviously I saw the first 2 and I thought it was great. And I'm pretty sure I knew that 4 was hated, and I think I knew 3 was disliked. And at this point in my life, I was pretty depressed, and a lot of my focus was drinking and stuff. And so when I was watching these movies, I was watching them mainly for tits and kills. But I did notice that the other things that made the other movies so great, weren't all the way there. But they're not terrible movies. I don't hate them. But I think that the reason that I'm excited about the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies is because they go too great, too okay, too great, too trash. And so now we're due for 2 good ones, right? Obviously I loved most of the new Sawyers. The mom didn't do much, but it reminded me of the mom in the remake, and I was like, oh, okay, so that comes from here. And then the little girl Sawyer I thought was fun, because kid killers are creepy because they don't have the concept to understand why they're doing what they're like. They're not as developed to understand the meaning of death, so it's gonna be way harder to reason with them, especially if they're already raised to kill. And obviously I love Viggo Mortensen, and then the guy that plays the cop in Nightmare on Elm Street, Joe Unger, his Tinker, he's fun. Alfredo's too much for me. It's like, ugh, sleazy. I don't like him at all. William Butler, love that he's in this, because it makes this, he's in Jason, and he's in Freddy's Nightmares, and those are like the top 3 to me. And so he's done the whole trifecta, which is amazing. Like, props, man. The final girl, I think that she doesn't really do it for me until the end of the movie. And I don't like the end of the movie. And by that I mean she only starts to really be awesome in the 3rd act, and I don't like the last scene, which is not the whole 3rd act, so the sentence isn't as dumb as it sounds. Yeah. I like the whole thing where she won't kill the armadillo at first, or she feels bad about that, but then by the end she's gone through so much that she's depraved enough to kill Leatherface. That's a big thing. That's at least a theme they're trying to go for. And this is a lot like this is a lot like Friday the 13th 7. Not just with William Butler, but with all the kills being cut down so much, and the ending being what the fuck. But I love Leatherface in this movie. I love how he's angry and angsty, he's hit, he's the first movie he's really childish, in the second movie he's just hitting puberty and figuring out women, and in the third movie he's an angry teenager. And I love that evolution, even though he died in part 2, but whatever. So I love the whole beginning with the cutting of the faces and the F-O-O-D. And of course I love Ken Foree, but I think that they either should have cut the scene where they made it look like he died, or not brought him back at the ending. It was very dumb, I think, the ending. And I think that screen tests, doing that, and bringing Alfredo back to kill him again, and showing Leatherface is alive again when he just got killed again. Like, they resurrect, like, because, like, Ken Foray knocks Alfredo out, and then he falls in the water and presumably drowns. You can bring him back without pissing me off. That's easy enough to redeem, right? So I'm not going to say that's a resurrection. But Benny gets a chainsaw to the fucking skull, and then Leatherface gets the skull cracked in with a rock. But the audience says they want them to live, so instead of reshooting an ending, you refilm something that says they lived through that, and then put that on the end. And I think that was just fucking stupid. I don't hate this movie, though. It's a really fun ride, and the song that plays at the end, Leatherface, is really fun. And then, of course, we have the other movie that I rented that night, The Next Generation. Now, The Next Generation is underrated. I love a movie that delves into Illuminati because it's not as crazy as it sounds, because it's just the idea of a bunch of rich businessmen running things, and if you don't think that's what's happening, come on now. Money speaks for everything in a capitalist society, especially late capitalism. And the whole concept of the family being related to the Illuminati is not a stretch, because in the first movie, Grandpa is like 114 or some shit, drinking blood of youths to get the adrenochrome to live longer, because when you're born, you're given a certain amount of brain chemicals that are supposed to last you until you die. And you slowly... Matthew McConaughey in this fourth movie, like, I think he's in my top... If you don't count Leatherface, like the Sawyers and Hewitts, Vilmer is top 3. Top 4. And I don't know, I'm not going to rank them yet, so I don't know if he's top 3 or top 4, but he's in the top 3 or 4. And I love Renee Zellweger. And I think that the Leatherface in this movie is a lot like Leatherface in the first one, only like way, way more bitchy and way more whiny. But I think that the environment he's in is more stressful. And for those of you that are all like bitching about him dressing like a woman at the end, he dresses like a woman at the end of the first movie too. He's wearing a suit, but he's wearing a woman's face. And there's a scene where he's wearing the apron to cook dinner. So it's not... that never bothered me. But, yeah, this movie's, like, bad. But it's, like, it knows it's bad, and it's being so bad it's funny. And I think that that's a good way to go when you can't capture what the other two movies captured. And yes, I'm referring to the first two, because the third movie didn't capture what the first two captured. It's badass, but it didn't capture. 4 doesn't either. And when I watched 4, I understood why the franchise was dead, and then I had even more respect for the remake for reclaiming the franchise's name. But I actually love this movie, even though I know it's trash, because, like I said, Matthew McConaughey's Vilmer is great. Renee Zellweger is also great in this movie, though. She's a really powerful final role. And, like, unlike in Halloween Resurrection, in this movie, when she talks shit to the killer and doesn't get killed, it's not as disrespectful because it's in Leatherface's character. Like when she says, "You sit the fuck down," and Leatherface sits down, to me, that makes sense. Whereas in the Halloween movie, when Busta Rhymes tells him to fuck off, take that mask off, and he just walks away, that's uncharacteristic, stupid, and it pisses me off. to just justify why I still love that part of the Texas movie. Like, there is, like, some things work in some franchises and don't work in others. But yeah, Next Generation. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, the whole Illuminati angle. I love the whole, like, after all of the people that are, like, really not good actors are dead, and it's just Renee Zellweger, McConaughey, and the family, and it's just chaos, it's really fun to watch. It's a drag to get through some of the conversation scenes, though. And I remember the first time I watched them, I was like, I'm glad I stopped with these ones. Even though I like them more than 3D, I don't know if I did it then. I don't know. And obviously the last one is Leatherface from 2017. And, yeah, this is like well-made trash. Now, think of this for a minute. Leatherface is mentally deficient, right? He's a horror icon, he's a cult following, 7 movies in, and on the 8th movie, like more than 40 years after the events of the first movie, you are going to tell me that Leatherface is just a normal dude who's pretending to be mentally deficient to keep the memory of his friend? Isn't, like, pretending to be mentally deficient really insulting? Isn't completely changing a character 40 years later, like, completely changing the character and adding in a bunch of new background past killers, which is another complaint with 3D, but, like, at least they didn't fuck up Leatherface. Like, they misused him, but they didn't, like, I don't know, this is just fucking insulting. And it's really well shot, and if it wasn't a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, and they cut out the ending or changed it, or just didn't do any of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre shit, like, it'd probably be a great movie. And, like, I think there's, like, little homages to every other movie. Like, when he shoots the girl and, like, the smoke's coming off of her, it reminds me of the remake, and, like, I can't, and I, like, yes, it's got a very cool, like, road story killer thing going on, and cool kills, but, like, well shot, but, like I said, it's just really insulting, and it pisses me off. So yeah, that's the whack order I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies in. But there should be character rankings for Scream popping up around the time this comes out, or probably after, maybe. I don't know. It seems like this will be easier to edit, so probably way after. But and then wherever you find podcasts, there'll be a Untitled Horror Podcast is the title of the podcast, because it's me and my friend Brock, and we shoot the shit about horror movies. And first one we're doing is unpopular horror opinions, and then the other one we're going to do is the Wishmasters. So that'll be fun. Yeah. Catch you laters.